Great, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Ruthie Caldwell. I'm one of the regional partners in What's Next East Kentucky. And I love What's Next Kentucky because it's just an organization of communities and different nonprofits and really anybody who wants to get involved with making Central Appalachia better, with making Eastern Kentucky better. And so I was really happy that we were able to get Rusty Justice to come and talk to us today because he's one of my favorite people in Eastern Kentucky. Rusty is an entrepreneur. He's an engineer. He owns or co-owns multiple businesses. For instance, he co-owns BitSource, which helped to teach folks in the coal industry how to do computer coding, and now they develop software, and they're kind of leading the way for technology in the region. He's also owner of Jigsaw Enterprises, which does construction, really innovative construction projects in the region, not necessarily just construction, but earth moving and emergency and all kinds of really cool stuff. So if there's something really neat going on in Eastern Kentucky, he's probably part of it, kind of like, Kevin Bacon, he's like, if you can think of like 6 different people, that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, there's 6 degrees to Rusty Justice in every innovative, cool project in Eastern Kentucky. So I just think he's fantastic. And he's also a historian. He loves being a champion of Eastern Kentucky. And so he's going to talk to us a little bit about some cool history today about Pikeville, as well as a neat book called Antifragile. So Rusty, if there's anything I missed, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, no, thank you for those kind words. I'm not nearly as cool as Ruthie portrays, I promise. But anyway, thank you for inviting me and for working to make our place better. I am an unapologetic hillbilly. I love this place. It's occupies a great deal of my time and my thought and my efforts. And it's been really good to me and to my family, and because of that, it motivates me along with my faith. It's how I express my faith. It motivates me to work every day any way I can, wherever I can be useful to help move our place forward. And so. What we're to talk about is a book called Antifragile. Has anyone on the group read Antifragile? Are they all familiar with it? Okay. Well, Antifragile is a book that came across my desk. My partner actually sent it to me about 6 or 7 years ago. And it really has been a transformative thing in my thinking and in our thinking organizationally. And written by a guy named Taleb. And I'll say right now, if any of you work in academia or government, he's not very kind to what he refers to as agency thinking. Not agency people, but agency thinking. And so he coins a term called anti-fragile. And anti-fragile is not a real word. He made it up. And so if you think of the term fragile, and so a wine glass, and you drop a wine glass, it breaks. If you were to, and it's a term I've heard used here today, if you were to pack a wine glass in a box with those little styrofoam peanuts, and you dropped it and it didn't break, it would be resilient. But if you drop the wine glass and it got stronger, it would be anti-fragile. And so this is the concept of his book. And it's not about things. It's not about it's not about a way to think. What it is really about is a way to think about what you're thinking about. And so I think it's very applicable here to us in the mountains, because he uses as a good example the Greek city-state. And what is more like the Greek city-state but all the small towns of Appalachia? And so I think I'm bullish on Appalachia. I think that we sit at the forefront of a great renaissance of Appalachia. And we've got obviously a lot of upside potential, but I think we're and we invest here. We invest our money here quite substantially, and we're business people. We like to make money, and so, we believe that Appalachia is a great investment, and it's, if we approach it the right way, systemically, we can accomplish great things and bring opportunities to our people that they lack, and we work on that in a lot of areas. Antifragile has informed our thinking about those things. So I'll just touch on a few concepts from the book, and the first one being the black swan theory, a black swan event. A black swan event is an event, he equates how agency thinking works, like driving your car by looking in the rearview mirror. And so when you are driving along, so we tend to predict in our agency thinking, how we predict budgets and plans and 5-year plans. I used to sit on the board of a college and we would future-proof things all the time, and it would drive me crazy to the point that I finally had to leave the board because I made everybody around me miserable and it just wasn't accomplishing anything. And so you really can't future-proof something. Life is what happens while we make other plans. And you just made those points earlier today, Donna. And so a black swan event is something you can't predict. An example of that is 9/11. Okay, 9/11 is not was not predictable, and those come along. You know, the Johnstown flood. You know, they're black swan events that occur, and they occur in our lives. They occur, things we can't predict. No amount of planning or anything can happen, and that's what that is. But they're not that common. But what are more common are fat tail curves. Fat tail curves are risks that exist. We know they're out there, and they're nothing until they occur. The tail of the curve is fat. And so a fat tail curve event would be the pandemic. Now, any healthcare official that I have spoken to, I remember being out of college, maybe 7 or 8, 9 years, one of my very closest friends was doing his residency. We were sitting around on a barbecue one day, out on a patio, drinking a beer and talking about what was going to kill us. We were all young and dumb. And he said, "Don't worry, it'll probably be a pandemic." And that's the first time I ever heard that word. Fast forward, I'm maybe, let's see, it's 2000, and I'll tell you when it was, 2008. I'm on a riverboat near Des Moines, Iowa, and out on a junket was people that manufacture machinery, John Deere. We were up there touring their factories. They took us out on this riverboat, and a guy I'm just casually speaking to talks about how he's really pondering pandemics and the next pandemic. Fortunately, because of that earlier experience, I knew what a pandemic was, and so we got into it. And he was doing research around pandemics. So pandemics occur, as do floods. They are not a problem until they're a problem. And so how do you determine this? The book Antifragile is really all about risk, how we manage risk and how we prepare for risk. And so he is an options trader by profession. He traded futures and options and is a statistician and a philosopher, Taleb is, and the most arrogant human being, if you watch him on YouTube, you'll ever observe. I kind of enjoy watching him. So he talks about certain, how do you structure deals or agreements such that they have a higher degree of success, a higher probability of success. The first thing is skin in the game. BitSource is now 6 years into the software development business. It's a business I knew nothing about, have no background in software. I had studied Fortran when they taught punch cards. That's how old I am. And so with dot matrix printers. And I didn't do very well in that class, but he talks about, it's not a slide that's on here, a thing called the green lumber theory. The green lumber theory is a very interesting story when you hear him tell it. But the point is, you don't have to know everything about something to know enough about something. So why were my partner and I able to start a software development company and not know either one of us be programmers or anything like that? Because we knew enough to know how to run a business. And it could be selling shoes or pizzas or building software. There's things about that, but businesses are businesses. And so when you're thinking about an option or an idea, the thing is you don't have to know it all. That's what academics do. And I'm not being negative about academics. Academics study things to detail. That's their job. That's not what entrepreneurs need to know and people driving change. They need to know enough, and they need to know, that they don't know everything, but if they know enough, they can be successful. It'll be painful. You'll learn, you'll make mistakes, but you do that. But the first thing is everybody in the equation has to have skin in the game. If everybody at the table doesn't stand to lose, the probability of success of that venture is not very high. And so when BitSource started, we started primarily with our own monies. There were two other companies that came forward at that time that did something similar to what BitSource did around coal mining, because there was a lot of money around retraining coal miners. Now, we leveraged that money, but at the time we were getting that money, 100% of it went to our employees, not to us, while they learned their job. And then we were putting in about $4 to every dollar that the government was. We had skin in the game. The other two endeavors was 100% the government's money, none of theirs. They made money by training people. Our goal was to employ people, totally different. But we had skin in the game and they didn't, and both of those failed miserably. So that is just something to look at whenever you are looking at any kind of venture you're making with a community, with a business, with anyone. If they don't have something to lose, you probably shouldn't go forward. So that was just one of the principles of this book. The next is asymmetric risk. Very important. Asymmetric risk is, if you think about any choice, what's to lose and what's to gain? Bungee jumping. Bungee jumping is an asymmetric risk. And the best thing can happen is you'll have fun. The worst thing can happen is you will die. Not a good decision. People do it. They trust in things that will protect them, but if they are wrong, they lose it all. Okay. So what you always want to look for in a deal when you structure any agreement or arrangement is that you truncate the downside. So if you were bungee jumping and there was a net below you, then okay, that's one thing. If you're bungee jumping and there's a volcano below you, or broken glass or something, or concrete, then you probably are, you're not thinking about your deals the right way. So asymmetric risk, and then you want unlimited upside risk. So if you buy a lottery ticket, for example, your risk is the amount of the ticket. You have an unlimited upside potential. And so, that's an example of an asymmetric risk with a truncated downside and unlimited upside. Not a good one. I don't buy lottery tickets, nor do I favor them, but that's an example of that kind of risk. So in Appalachia, why is Appalachia poor? Spent a lot of my time driving around in my pickup truck thinking about this. And really, there's a lot of reasons. Being geographically bound is a problem. The fact that our agencies get their money by perpetuating poverty is a problem. The fact that we have bought in as a people to the narrative that we are poor is a problem. The fact that we, because of our being geographically bound, do not have access to internet, things like that, is a problem. But it doesn't mean our people are less than. They just have challenges, but they're as smart and industrious and hardworking. It's, you know, people are people no matter where they're from. Okay. And so they're not a unique or special group, but one of the factors that contributes to that is repetitive flooding. And so an example of it, so Pikeville, like all the other cities in Appalachia, was fragile to flooding. We've just seen it in Beattyville and numerous other towns around our region. Now, so Pikeville flooded in 57, go on with the slide. And then between 57 and the next flood, which is, we always said we got a flood every 20 years. We got a mayor named Mayor Hamley. He was a physician. He was a forward-thinking person and an enlightened leader. And because of that, he had the idea of the cut through. Now, I knew Dr. Hamley. My dad knew him very well. And I remember being a young boy laying at home when my dad walked in and said, he was at the courthouse. His best friend growing up was the county court clerk. He was over there visiting him that day. And the mayor came in and told him of his plans to build the cut through. The county judge was there and the magistrates, a couple of those, and several of the other people around the courthouse. And he rolled out his plan for the Pikeville cut through, and they all laughed at him and threw the plan in the garbage when the mayor left. And my dad brought those plans home and gave them to me. And he said, I was in the room today with a great man and everyone there made fun of him. Not in my lifetime, but yours. They'll put a statue of that man in the city park. So I remembered that. And so the Pikeville cut through became a reality. Go to the 77 flood. Before he got it finished, we had the 77 flood, year of the first hillbilly days. And that was Pikeville that I grew up in. I remember riding a boat all the way from one of those mountains to the other. And around that gymnasium there you see in the corner, I rode a boat through there when I was still in high school and or just out of high school. And I recall that flood very well. It's one of those things imprinted on your memory. And since there's never been another flood in Pikeville. And this is Pikeville today, and I'm sure most people on the call have been to Pikeville, but it's a beautiful little town, and it's different. It's kind of the oasis in Appalachia. I mean, it's really, if you look at Pikeville, it's about 2 hours to the interstate in any direction. It's the center of Central Appalachia, you know, interstate highways have a kind of, they distort the gravitational field around the towns they go by. If you go to London, you know, you'll see, you know, how much London has grown. Those places around the edge, perimeter of Appalachia prosper. It's harder in the center of Appalachia. And so Pikeville's as far away from that as you can get, and yet it blooms. And the cut through is part of the reason, not the only. There's several reasons. We have a legacy of enlightened leadership going back to its founding days. It's really impressive when you study the history of Pikeville, the number of enlightened leaders we've had generationally. Of course, we have a university, but the largest bank domiciled in Kentucky is headquartered there, and our hospital is a huge regional healthcare provider, and they make jobs, and that drives that prosperity. But it's also in the middle of the largest coal-producing county in eastern Kentucky by far. I mean, it exceeds it by a large number. And it has lost the most. And Pike County itself is kind of, you know, has suffered because of that, but the city of Pikeville has continued to flourish. And part of that is because of the anti-fragile decision made by Mayor Hamley to build this cut through. And Pikeville is no longer fragile to flooding. As a matter of fact, whenever it floods, Pikeville becomes stronger. Because while every other small town in Appalachia stops and cleans out the mud, takes their energies and their resources and spends it, I always say the day after the flood, I'm in the emergency response business, so I know. I went to Prestonsburg, where I love these towns. I love all these towns, so I'm not picking on it. They have a great mayor in Prestonsburg, and I think the flood damage was 12 million or something just along stream banks. And I think I went through the city of Pikeville, assessed their damages, and it was about 150,000, 200,000, something. It was a small number. And so the thing they were focused on in Pikeville the next day was completing their bike trail and working on their industrial park. So Pikeville just kept on with its business as usual. Beattyville, the other towns around that were impacted by flooding, Paintsville, they had to take their time and their resources and expend it on flood damage. So as we think about poverty and how we fix problems, flooding is a real problem. Thinking anti-fragilely about it and how any problem or challenge our towns have, because for Appalachia to succeed, I always say Pikeville does a lot of things that are regional. It does not do good if the region is not flourishing for Pikeville. And so I'm not a homer for the city of Pikeville. I love it, and I love all the other towns around. And we need to think about that, our system, holistically, and we need all of our communities to win. And so as we think and apply these things, these ways of thinking about problem solving to these problems, I feel like we can have a better chance of making a fundamental impact. That's as quickly as I can go through that.
Wow, Rusty, thank you so much. That was very inspiring. When you first told me about this book, it has changed the way that I've been thinking about things for the past few months, and I'm excited to finish it. It is a very long book, so I really appreciate that you're able to put it into 15